This video embarks on a chronological journey through some of the worst military disasters in history, highlighting the strategic missteps, the cost in lives and resources, and the broader historical impacts of these ill-fated campaigns. Number 1. The Battle of Cannae, 216 BCE. In the midst of the Second Punic War, the Battle of Cannae, fought on August 2, 216 BCE, stands as a dark testament to military disaster. This clash between Carthaginian forces, commanded by the brilliant strategist Hannibal Barca, and the armies of the Roman Republic, resulted in one of the most devastating defeats in Roman history. The Roman consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro, led a numerically superior force of over 80,000 men against Hannibal's much smaller army of around 50,000. However, numbers weren't enough to secure victory. Hannibal masterfully exploited the overconfidence and aggressive tactics of the Roman commanders, luring their forces into a deadly trap. Adopting an unusual crescent formation, Hannibal's forces allowed the Romans to push against the center of their lines, drawing the bulk of the Roman infantry into a tightly packed mass. Then, the flanks of the Carthaginian formation closed in, enveloping the Roman forces in a deadly pincer movement. This strategy resulted in the encirclement and annihilation of the Roman army. The defeat was catastrophic for Rome. It's estimated that over 50,000 Romans were killed, including Paulus and numerous other high-ranking officials. The Battle of Cannae demonstrated the strategic genius of Hannibal and represented one of the most crushing defeats ever inflicted upon the Roman military. Despite the disaster, Rome refused to capitulate and managed to recover in the following years, eventually winning the war. Nonetheless, Cannae remained a haunting reminder of a bloody day when the invincibility of Rome was shattered on a Punic battlefield. Number 2. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest, 9 CE. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest, which unfolded in 9 CE, marks a colossal failure of the Roman Empire under Emperor Augustus. Rome, in its quest for territorial expansion, underestimated the local Germanic tribes' resilience and familiarity with the terrain, which led to a stunning defeat that stalled Rome's expansion into Germania. The battle commenced when 3 Roman legions led by Publius Quinctilius Varus were lured into the dense Teutoburg forest by Arminius, a chieftain of the Cherusci tribe and a former ally of Rome. Unbeknownst to Varus, Arminius had secretly united various Germanic tribes in a rebellion against the Roman occupation. The dense forest, incessant rain, and marshy terrain disoriented the Roman legions, disrupting their formation and communication. The Germanic tribes, familiar with the forest, launched a series of guerrilla-style attacks, ambushing the Romans who were ill-prepared to retaliate effectively in the difficult terrain. The Roman forces were annihilated, with an estimated 20,000 soldiers killed. This catastrophe sent shockwaves through the Roman Empire, halting its expansion east of the Rhine River. It was a psychological blow for Augustus, who reputedly cried out, "Varus, give me back my legions!" The battle forever changed the Roman military, emphasizing the importance of local knowledge and the dangers of underestimating an enemy. Number 3. The Battle of Adrianople, 378 CE. The Battle of Adrianople, fought on August 9, 378 CE, stands as one of the worst military disasters in the history of the Roman Empire and a significant milestone on its road to decline. The battle occurred during the Gothic War, pitting the Eastern Roman Emperor Valens against Gothic rebels, comprising the Visigoths and Ostrogoths. Valens, hoping to secure a swift victory, rashly engaged the Goths near Adrianople, modern Edirne, Turkey, before the arrival of reinforcements from the Western Roman Emperor Gratian. This tactical impatience led to disaster. Valens underestimated the strength of the Gothic cavalry, and his forces were taken by surprise when the Gothic cavalry, believed to be away foraging, returned mid-battle to strike at the Roman flank. The Roman infantry was encircled and overwhelmed by the Goths, resulting in a catastrophic defeat. The loss of life was staggering, including Valens himself. 2/3 of the Roman army, around 10,000 to 15,000 soldiers, were reportedly killed. The disaster at Adrianople exposed the vulnerability of the Roman Empire and emboldened its enemies. It also highlighted the limitations of traditional Roman infantry tactics against more mobile cavalry forces, marking a shift in warfare. This defeat significantly weakened the Eastern Roman Empire, accelerating its decline and the eventual fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century. Number 4. The Battle of Hastings, 1066. On October 14, 1066, England witnessed a cataclysmic event that irreversibly shaped its future: the Battle of Hastings. It was a disaster for the Anglo-Saxons, and their defeat marked the end of Anglo-Saxon rule and the dawn of Norman conquest. King Harold Godwinson, who had just repelled a Viking invasion in the north, was forced to march his exhausted troops south to meet the invading Normans under Duke William of Normandy. William had staked his claim to the English throne following the death of King Edward the Confessor, challenging Harold's reign. The battle was fiercely contested, but the turning point came with a feigned retreat by the Normans. The Anglo-Saxon forces broke their defensive shield wall to pursue, falling into William's trap. The Normans turned, cutting down the Anglo-Saxon forces in the open field. Harold was killed, allegedly shot in the eye with an arrow, and with his death, Anglo-Saxon resistance crumbled. The defeat was catastrophic for the Anglo-Saxons. The aristocracy was virtually wiped out, replaced by Norman nobles. The Battle of Hastings significantly impacted England's culture, governance, and language, marking a pivot in English history. Number 5. The Battle of Manzikert, 1071. A pivotal moment in the decline of Byzantine power, the Battle of Manzikert, fought on August 26, 1071, was a severe military disaster. It saw the Seljuk Turks, under Sultan Alp Arslan, defeating the Byzantine army led by Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes. The Byzantines underestimated the Seljuks, who expertly used their mobile horse archers to harass the Byzantine lines. Romanos, misinterpreting a tactical withdrawal by the Seljuks as a rout, ordered a full attack, stretching his forces thin. The Seljuks, seizing the opportunity, counterattacked and encircled the Byzantine forces. The aftermath was disastrous for the Byzantines. Their casualties were high, and many, including Romanos, were captured. The defeat exposed the vulnerability of the Byzantine Empire and paved the way for the steady advance of Turkic peoples into Anatolia, weakening Byzantine control over the region. This battle is often regarded as the moment when the power dynamics shifted in favor of the Seljuk Turks, leading to the gradual Turkification of Anatolia and the eventual establishment of the Ottoman Empire, which would rule the region for centuries. Number 6. The Siege of Constantinople, 1453. One of the most consequential military disasters in medieval history was the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire, had been in decline, while the Ottoman Turks were on the rise. Sultan Mehmed II, a visionary leader seeking to establish a world empire, set his sights on Constantinople. The Byzantine Emperor Constantine II, with a mere 7,000 men, stood against an Ottoman force of around 100,000. Despite this severe mismatch, the formidable Theodosian walls of Constantinople, bolstered by the strategic use of a large chain across the Golden Horn, initially kept the Ottomans at bay. However, the invention of gunpowder gave the attackers a devastating new tool: massive cannons which slowly crumbled the once impervious walls. After a grueling 53-day siege, the Ottomans breached the walls on May 29, 1453. The defenders fought valiantly but were ultimately overrun. Emperor Constantine V himself died in the fighting, marking the end of a 1500-year-old empire. The loss of Constantinople was catastrophic. It marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and a shift in power that reshaped Europe and the Middle East. The city was renamed Istanbul and became the capital of the Ottoman Empire, a powerful entity that stood at the crossroads of East and West for the next 4 centuries. Number 7. The Battle of Little Bighorn, 1876. Known as Custer's Last Stand, the Battle of Little Bighorn, which occurred on June 25, 1876 in Montana Territory, stands as a glaring disaster in the annals of U.S. military history. The battle was part of the Great Sioux War, waged between the U.S. Army and the Lakota Sioux and Northern Cheyenne. The 7th Cavalry, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, was tasked with forcing the native tribes back onto reservations. Custer, underestimating the strength of the Native American forces, launched an attack on what he thought was a small encampment. In reality, he was facing a gathering of as many as 2,000 warriors. The U.S. forces were outmatched and outmaneuvered. Custer and all his men, approximately 210 soldiers, were killed in a matter of hours, an event that shocked the nation. The defeat at Little Bighorn highlighted the U.S. Army's failure to understand the complexities of Plains Indian warfare. It also marked a temporary victory for the Sioux and Cheyenne, although the U.S. government redoubled its efforts in the war, leading to the tribe's eventual defeat. Number 8. The Battle of Isandlwana, 1879. The Battle of Isandlwana, fought on January 22, 1879, stands as one of the most shocking defeats of a modern army by indigenous forces. This clash occurred during the Anglo-Zulu War, when Britain's imperial ambitions brought them into conflict with the Zulu Kingdom in southern Africa. The British force, under the command of Lieutenant General Lord Chelmsford, was technologically superior to the Zulu warriors. The British Army was armed with Martini Henry rifles and rocket batteries, while the Zulu warriors primarily wielded spears, known as assegais. However, British complacency and underestimation of the Zulu combat capabilities led to disaster. Despite explicit orders to fortify their camp, the British forces didn't, feeling secure in their technological superiority. A large Zulu impi, or army, took advantage of this, launching a surprise attack on the British camp. Outnumbered and unprepared, the British line collapsed under the fierce assault, resulting in a catastrophic defeat. Of the approximately 1,800 British troops present, over 1,300 were killed, marking a significant loss. The battle proved a significant victory for the Zulus and a stark reminder to the British of the dangers of underestimating an opponent. Despite this shocking setback, the British eventually rallied and defeated the Zulu nation by the end of the war. Number 9. The Battle of Tsushima, 1905. The Battle of Tsushima, fought on May 27, 28, 1905 between Russia and Japan during the Russo-Japanese War, is considered one of history's most decisive naval battles. It ended in a disastrous defeat for Russia and highlighted Japan's rise as a formidable naval power. Tsar Nicholas II sent the Baltic Fleet, commanded by Admiral Zinovy Rozhestvensky, on an arduous 18,000-mile journey to the Pacific to engage the Japanese fleet. However, the Russian fleet was outdated and ill-prepared to face the modern, well-trained Japanese forces led by Admiral Heihachiro Togo. Togo's forces intercepted the Russian fleet in the Tsushima Strait, between Korea and Japan. Through superior tactics and better use of naval technology, the Japanese decimated the Russian fleet. The Russian losses were staggering. Of the 38 ships that ventured into the battle, only 10 made it out. Moreover, around 4,000 Russian sailors lost their lives compared to a little over 100 on the Japanese side. The defeat was a major blow to Russian prestige, contributing to domestic unrest and eventually the 1905 revolution. Conversely, Japan's victory established it as the dominant naval power in the East, marking a significant shift in global power dynamics. Number 10. The Gallipoli Campaign, 1915-16. The Gallipoli Campaign, also known as the Dardanelles Campaign, was a disastrous attempt by the Allied powers, particularly Britain and France, to control the sea route from Europe to Russia during World War I. The plan, championed by British First Lord of the Admiralty Winston Churchill, aimed to capture the Ottoman capital of Constantinople, knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war, and open a supply line to Russia. The campaign began in April 1915 with a naval assault on the Dardanelles Straits. However, poor planning, logistical problems, and fierce Ottoman resistance turned the campaign into a stalemate with heavy losses on both sides. In the subsequent land campaign, the Allied troops were unable to advance beyond the beaches, getting trapped in a bloody 8-month stalemate. By the end of 1915, it was clear that the campaign had failed. The evacuation was completed by January 1916, ending the ill-fated mission. The Allies suffered heavy casualties, with more than 200,000 wounded or killed, and it marked a significant defeat for the Allied war effort. The campaign is seen as a defining moment in the national identities of Australia and New Zealand, who commemorate it annually as Anzac Day. Number 11. The Battle of Stalingrad, 1942–43. The Battle of Stalingrad, fought between the Axis powers and the Soviet Union from August 23, 1942 to February 2, 1943, is considered one of the most brutal battles in human history and a turning point in World War II. The city bore the name of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, making it a symbolic and strategic objective for Adolf Hitler in his war against the Soviet Union. The German Sixth Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, advanced into the city, but faced fierce resistance from the Red Army and the civilian population. The urban combat in Stalingrad was brutal and costly, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. However, the tide turned when the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, encircling and trapping the German forces in the city. Cut off from supplies and reinforcements, the German forces were starved and frozen in the harsh Russian winter. Despite Hitler's orders to fight to the last man, Paulus surrendered on February 2, 1943. The German defeat resulted in approximately 150,000 casualties and the surrender of around 91,000 troops, the majority of whom never returned from Soviet captivity. Stalingrad marked the first major defeat of Hitler's armies on land and a significant turning point in World War II. The heavy losses materially and morally crippled Germany's ability to continue a war of attrition, contributing significantly to the downfall of Nazi Germany. Number 12. The Battle of Arnhem, 1944. The Battle of Arnhem, part of Operation Market Garden in September 1944, was a significant setback for the Allied forces during World War II. Conceived by British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the plan aimed to end the war by Christmas, envisioning a swift thrust through the Netherlands into Germany's industrial heartland. Paratroopers from the British 1st Airborne Division were tasked to seize the bridge at Arnhem and hold it until relieved by ground forces. However, due to a combination of poor intelligence, logistical problems, and stronger-than-expected German resistance, the plan fell apart. The paratroopers, landing far from the bridge due to logistical concerns, encountered two SS Panzer divisions, contrary to intelligence suggesting the area was lightly defended. Meanwhile, the ground forces' advance was delayed by demolitions and German resistance along the single road leading to Arnhem. Despite a valiant fight, the British paratroopers were overwhelmed. By the time the ground forces reached the outskirts of Arnhem, the remaining airborne troops had been forced to withdraw, and the operation was abandoned. The failure of Market Garden resulted in approximately 15,000 Allied casualties and failed to secure a route into Germany, prolonging the war in Europe. The Battle of Arnhem has since been remembered for the courage of the British paratroopers and their efforts to hold the bridge too far. Number 13. The Bay of Pigs invasion, 1961. The Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961 was a failed attempt by U.S.-backed Cuban exiles to overthrow the communist government of Fidel Castro, marking a major embarrassment for the Kennedy administration. The plan, developed during the Eisenhower administration and carried out under Kennedy, involved training and arming a force of Cuban exiles, known as Brigade 2506. They were expected to ignite a popular uprising against Castro's regime upon landing. However, the operation was a disaster from the start. Initial air attacks on Cuba's airfields failed to destroy all of Castro's air force. The invaders landed at the Bay of Pigs and immediately encountered strong resistance from well-prepared Cuban forces. The expected popular uprising never materialized, and the force was quickly overwhelmed. 2 days into the invasion, the exiles were either killed or captured, with over 1,200 members of Brigade 2506 taken prisoner. The failed invasion significantly embarrassed the young Kennedy administration, hurt U.S. prestige, and pushed Cuba closer to the Soviet Union, culminating in the Cuban Missile Crisis a year later. Number 14. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, 1954. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, fought from March to May 1954, marks one of the most significant military disasters for colonial forces in the 20th century. It was the climactic confrontation of the First Indochina War between the French Union's colonial forces and the Viet Minh, the nationalist and communist revolutionaries of Vietnam. General Henri Navarre, the French commander in Indochina, sought to draw the Viet Minh into a decisive set-piece battle, and the valley of Dien Bien Phu was chosen for this purpose. The French established a base there in November 1953, intending to disrupt Viet Minh supply lines into neighboring Laos. The French believed that the remote location and difficult terrain would prevent the Viet Minh from bringing artillery to bear on the garrison. They were wrong. The Viet Minh, under General Vo Nguyen Giap, exhibited remarkable logistical abilities, disassembling heavy artillery pieces, transporting them through the dense jungle terrain, and reassembling them on the surrounding hills. In addition, tens of thousands of laborers were used to transport supplies and build extensive fortifications. On March 13, 1954, the Viet Minh launched their offensive. The French, despite their superior equipment and air support, were taken aback by the Viet Minh's artillery capabilities and their extensive tunnel and trench systems that allowed them to move supplies and troops with little exposure to French fire. Over the following weeks, the Viet Minh slowly strangled the French garrison. They captured key French outposts one by one, tightening the noose around the French and rendering their airstrip unusable, thereby cutting off the garrison's lifeline. Despite heroic resistance, the French were unable to break the siege. Desperate attempts to supply and reinforce the garrison by airdrop were inadequate and increasingly perilous due to anti-aircraft fire. Conditions within the French garrison deteriorated rapidly. The troops were subjected to constant artillery fire and had to contend with low supplies, poor sanitation, and a lack of medical facilities. Morale plummeted as the French leadership struggled to maintain order and coordinate an effective defense. On May 7th, after 55 days of relentless combat, the French garrison was overrun. Approximately 11,000 French and Allied soldiers were taken prisoner, many of whom died in captivity due to harsh conditions. The defeat was a significant blow to French prestige and had far-reaching implications. It effectively ended French colonial rule in Indochina. The Geneva Conference, already underway when Dien Bien Phu fell, concluded with an agreement that divided Vietnam along the 17th parallel, setting the stage for the Second Indochina War, or the Vietnam War, as it is more commonly known in the West. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu is considered a landmark battle of the 20th century. It demonstrated that a colonial power could be defeated by an indigenous force, fundamentally challenging the premise of colonialism. This battle, and the war that it concluded, served as an example for other colonial peoples seeking independence, particularly in Algeria and French sub-Saharan Africa. Furthermore, it marked the beginning of the end of the era of European colonial empires. Number 15. The Operation Eagle Claw, 1980. Operation Eagle Claw, also known as the Iran Hostage Rescue Mission, was a United States military operation conducted on April 24, 1980, aimed at rescuing 52 American embassy staff held captive at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, Iran. The mission's failure was a significant setback for the United States and had substantial implications for U.S. domestic and foreign policy. The embassy staff had been taken hostage following the Iranian Revolution that overthrew the Shah and installed Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini as Iran's supreme leader. After diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis failed, President Jimmy Carter approved a secret rescue mission, codenamed Operation Eagle Claw. The mission plan was complex and ambitious. It involved multiple branches of the U.S. military and required a series of precise movements and operations. Delta Force operators would be flown into Iran aboard EC-130 transport planes and meet up with RH-53 DC Stallion helicopters that had flown in from the USS Nimitz, an aircraft carrier stationed in the Arabian Sea. The plan called for the helicopters to refuel in the Iranian desert, known as Desert 1, then transport the Delta Force operators to a location near Tehran. The operators would then infiltrate the embassy, free the hostages, and transport them to an airstrip that had been secured by U.S. Army Rangers. From there, they would be flown out of Iran. However, from the outset, the mission ran into difficulties. 2 of the 8 helicopters developed malfunctions, leaving only 6 operational helicopters. This was the bare minimum required to carry out the mission, according to the plan. When a 3rd helicopter developed a hydraulic issue after landing at Desert 1, mission commanders decided to abort the operation. As the remaining helicopters repositioned for departure, one collided with a transport aircraft, causing a catastrophic explosion that killed 8 American servicemen and injured several others. The remaining forces evacuated, leaving behind the wreckage and the bodies of the fallen, which were later paraded by the Iranian authorities. Operation Eagle Claw was a major embarrassment for the U.S. and contributed to President Carter's defeat in the 1980 presidential election. The failure exposed significant deficiencies in the U.S. military's ability to conduct joint operations and led to a series of reforms, including the creation of the United States Special Operations Command, USSOCOM, and the further development of Special Operations Forces. Moreover, it exacerbated the hostage crisis, which lasted for 444 days and only ended after Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president. The crisis and the failed rescue operation marked a low point in U.S.-Iranian relations and set the tone for the mutual hostility that continues to define the relationship. The mission is remembered in U.S. military history as a testament to the courage of the servicemen who risked their lives and a painful lesson in the complexities of military operations. Every year, Special Operations Forces commemorate the mission on April 24th, known as Desert One Day, to honor the fallen and to reflect on the lessons learned from the operation.